Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know if Kickstarter is launching this week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the Kickstarter and GameFound campaigns that are coming out, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. Before we get started, I do like to go over some new discoveries that I just found out about since the last video, and I do have quite a few to go over. And the first one is going to be for Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, and this is going to be a standalone expansion to Sleeping Gods, which really just means it's going to be taking place in the same universe, and it's also going to be sharing some of the mechanisms, but it's going to be quite a lot different with this version. And the reason I'm pointing this one out is because the original game just came out last year and it's been getting quite a lot of buzz and routinely shows up at the top of many top 10 lists for games of 2021. And the next thing I want to point out is that there's going to be a playthrough of Wayfarers of the South Tigris going live on the 20th of this month. And this is a game that is a continuation of a series that's exploring a few different regions in this universe. There's quite a few of these games, but the most notable are Raiders of the North Sea and Paladins of the West Kingdom. And 3 of the games in this series are actually in the top 100 on BGG, which is a pretty incredible feat. So if you're a fan of this series and you're a fan of those previous games, or if you just want to learn more of what's to come, then this is definitely a live stream you'll want to check out. I'll leave a link to their YouTube channel right up here. And of course, this segment wouldn't be complete without a few IP-based games, and the first one I have is Street Fighter V, and this is going to be a cooperative game based on the Street Fighter IP, and this is going to be published by Blacklist Games, that's known for creating Street Masters as well as Alter Quest, and I imagine that this one might play similar to Street Masters. Obviously, it looks like it has a very similar theme, so I imagine this is going to take some inspiration from that. Of course, I could be completely wrong about that, but I will be doing a more detailed breakdown of this game once it launches, which should be very soon because it's scheduled to release in early 2022, which is pretty much up in the next month or two. And the next IP-based game is that Gale Force 9 is going to be making another Dune game, but this one's going to be a completely different game, and it's actually taking an existing game and re-implementing it, and that game is Borderlands. This will be much more than just an IP put onto an existing game. They're going to tweak a lot of the rules, and I'm sure there'll be a ton of improvements and clever ways that they integrate the theme into the gameplay. And Gale Force 9 is the same publisher that did publish Dune the board game, which I know got some incredible reviews. So if you're familiar with that game, I'm sure there will be aspects that carry over to this one as well. And the last game I want to point out is Leviathan Wilds, and this is going to be coming from the same developers that had worked on the Pandemic series, but this game looks like it's going to be quite a bit different. This is also a cooperative game, but it has you going up against giant Leviathans, where players will actually be scaling these beasts in order to take them down, because the Leviathan will actually have its own board that players will be moving across. And this one is said to be inspired by Breath of the Wild and Shadow of the Colossus, but I think they're just referring to the portion where you're scaling these giant beasts, because I don't think there is a huge explorable world in this game. I think it's more about the combat. Of course, I will go over this in a lot more detail when it launches, so make sure to subscribe if you want to know more about any of these games. And that is all I have for new announcements, so let's check out the Kickstarters. And the first campaign we have launches on March 14th, and this one's called Oak, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a Euro game where each player is going to be a leader of their own druid order, and each player is competing for the most victory points so that they can prove themselves as the most worthy to the spirit of the forest. And this is a game where players will be starting out with a small insignificant tribe, but they'll be growing it throughout the game and gain access to new abilities and more ways to gain victory points. The game offers a ton of different paths to victory, and if you are smart with your actions, there's a lot of opportunity to chain your actions together into some really powerful turns. Throughout the game, players will be recruiting different creatures of the forest for help, learning powerful spells, discovering mighty artifacts, and creating new sacred places where they can house and grow their flock of druids. The game plays over 5 rounds on a central board, but players will each have their own asymmetrical player boards as well, and players will be performing actions both on their player boards as well as the central board. And there's 2 types of actions in the game. There's the more powerful active actions that you'll be using workers from your player board in order to perform, and then there's the passive actions that you'll be using your meeples on the main board for. And in order to perform these different actions, you're going to have to meet a few different criteria. First of all, you're going to need to play a worker there, and more importantly, you're going to have to play the appropriate worker. Some spaces can accept any worker, while some might require a certain type, and you can upgrade your workers throughout the game to give them some special abilities. And some of the special benefits for these different upgraded druids is to pay a lower cost to perform an action, add a new upgrade space to your board, pay less ingredients for potions, or can use a space that is already used by another meeple, or even visit spaces that are off limits to all other meeples. And a really fun thing about upgrading your meeples is not only do they get access to some special abilities, but you'll also be getting a really cool piece of clothing that you'll be able to put on that meeple to indicate that they have been upgraded. And these are all shown in this image here, and they're made of a stretchy plastic, which makes it really easy to put onto the meeples. Also, in order to play your actions, you're going to be using your hand of cards, and each card is multi-use. There's going to be 3 parts to each card. The top indicates a location, and each location is going to have 3 different spaces that players can put their worker on, and each one's going to have a different cost and a different benefit for doing so. Most of the spaces you can only have 1 worker, unless of course you've upgraded a worker that is able to break that rule. And these are the spaces where you're going to be doing your more powerful active actions. Alternatively, you can use the card to play a passive action, and in that case you'll be playing the bottom of the card, which will allow you to move one of your meeples up into the central tree on the board. And this tree has multiple paths with different benefits and victory points that you'll gain by moving through those different branches. And this is a bit of a race because whoever reaches the end of a path first is going to get the special benefit that offers. And throughout these different actions, players can gain things like creature cards, which are going to allow them to perform some one-time or ongoing abilities, or gain some different monoliths or shrines where they can put workers to gain more victory points or other resources, and these are actually going to upgrade your player board. Or they can gain special artifacts, which actually slot into the side of your player board, and each time you put a worker there, it's going to rotate 1 notch until you fully completed it, and you can get the benefit that it offers, and that will open up a space for another artifact. There's also a bit of set collection where players can create different potions for different effects and bonuses. So you can start to see how there's a lot of really neat mechanisms baked into this game, and a lot of things that I haven't seen before in other Euro games. And players will be playing this game, taking turns performing different actions until all players have passed, and then that ends the round and there's a bit of a cleanup phase, and then that repeats, and then after 5 rounds, the player with the most victory points wins the game. Definitely one worth checking out, especially if you love Euro games, and if this one does interest you, I have links to this campaign and all the others that I'm going to mention in the description below, and you'll definitely want to follow along because it'll get you some free sleeves added to your pledge. And launching on March 15th, we have Cthulhu Island, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a competitive board game where players are each creating their own theme park filled with horrific rides and different creatures from the Cthulhu mythos. Players are going to be competing to make the most popular theme park, and the player that does that wins the game. This is a game that I thought was going to be launching last week, but it got pushed to this week, so I've already covered it, so I will roll that footage for you now. And this is a competitive board game where players are trying to create their most grotesque theme park, and they're going to be getting different creatures and elder gods from other dimensions in order to show off in their park. Players are going to be starting by picking a director, which is going to give that player a special ability. Then they're also going to be starting with a specific ancient one as well. And each ancient one is going to have 3 special abilities that are unique to that ancient one. And each of these 3 abilities are stronger than the last, but they do come with a catch because in order to use your ancient one's abilities, you're going to have to make sacrifices. So make sure that you're recruiting as many cultists as possible. Players will also have a special action board where most of the actions will take place, but on a player's turn they're going to be putting out a tile to expand the modular map, and then they're going to either explore those tiles or enlist or exterminate cultists. Each area on the map also comes with its own set of actions, and these can do different things like gain new powers for the player, summon creatures, build attractions, or entice visitors to your park, or destroy your opponents. In order to perform the actions on that map tile, you're going to have the most cultists there, so there is a bit of an area control aspect to this game as well. The game uses a Mancala system for you to perform your actions, so as you're performing the actions, they're going to be redistributed out on your board, but you want to be limited with the actions that you actually take, because if you use too many, you can actually open a portal to the other world, and that can have negative effects on your future turns. This game looks like a lot of fun. I love the theme, and I love the idea of these different powers and making sacrifices in order to use your Ancient One's powers, and it looks like this one's going to be coming with some really cool miniatures as well. So definitely one worth checking out, especially if you are a fan of the Cthulhu mythos, or making sacrifices. And the next campaign we have also launches on the 15th, and this one's called Tamashii Chronicles of Ascend. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a cyberpunk adventure board game that has a really interesting puzzle to it, where players are going to be exploring a hex board and trying to complete different scenarios. Scenarios can be both competitive or cooperative, so there are quite a bit of different ways to play this game. And the whole premise of this game is that a rogue AI has taken over the world, and it's trying to exterminate humankind. Deceit. Players will be struggling to survive in this world, but then also trying to pursue their own individual agendas. And a really interesting aspect of this game is that players can actually download into different bodies, and then they'll get special abilities depending on the body that they inhabit. And players can change bodies mid-game to get more powerful abilities, but they will have to find those bodies first in order to do so. This does have a cyberpunk theme, so players will also be able to augment their bodies with different special upgrades and abilities. So there is quite a lot of variability in the different players that you can play as, since each of them all have their own asymmetric abilities to start with, but then you can also upgrade them with these augmentation cards. And I'm normally not too interested in Awakened Realms games. Maybe this one's a little bit different because it's Awakened Realms Light, I don't know. But this one does look like a lot of fun for a few different reasons, and for that it's going to be my pick of the week as well because it's the one that I'm most excited about. I really like the concept here with the different missions that allow you to play cooperatively and competitively, and I like the idea of being able to change into different bodies to gain some different special abilities, but then you can always move your augmentations across those bodies. And all that sounds like a ton of fun, but I think they also added a really interesting puzzle here that's going to bring a lot of depth into the game, and that's going to come into this game with something known as programming, which players have to do in order to perform their special abilities, activate their different augmentations, or even perform different actions on the different areas of the boards. Players are going to be navigating a modular hexagonal board that's going to have some hidden locations and resources, and when you visit these locations you're going to flip those tiles up, revealing the actions that you can perform there. At the start of each round, there's going to be a quest phase where different events are going to occur based on the scenario that the players have decided to play, as well as the current state of the game. So those events can cause different effects that can change the way that the game plays, or add new resources, or change or modify the board. And these effects can change quite a bit as progress is made on that scenario. But after that, players get to play the programming phase, and this is where each player is going to be modifying some tokens on their player board, and they're going to be able to move them adjacently, performing a certain number of actions, and you're going to be trying to create different patterns in order to unlock your special abilities, or to perform other actions on the following turn to interact with different areas on the map, or to complete certain objectives. Players can do this all simultaneously, and then they can also buy and manage their augmentations if they want to change the augmentations that their character has. And then after this phase, there is the action phase where players can each perform 3 actions where they can either move, perform additional programming actions, or perform a quest action outlined on a specific scenario, or a location action or an action on one of their augmentation cards. But this is where another really neat aspect of the game comes into play, because each time you perform an action, you're more likely to be caught by the rogue AI. So for each action that you perform, you're going to have to roll a die, and depending on how that die rolls, you're going to have to advance your danger track. And this is going to continue to advance throughout the game, and once you reach a certain threshold, the AI is going to send some robots to go out and attack you. So there's always more risk when players are performing more actions. There's a bit of push your luck here, which is a mechanism that I'm a huge fan of. And if these enemy attacks get triggered, then there's going to be an enemy phase where the enemies get spawned and attack that character. And rounds continue like this with a quest phase, a programming phase, an action phase, and an enemy phase until the endgame trigger is reached, which would be outlined on your scenario card. This one looks like it has quite a lot of really cool ideas and ties them all together in a really fun way, and it really looks like a game that I would enjoy. So if this is one that you think you would like as well, definitely check it out, and you can follow along on the campaign page by clicking that follow button. As always, links in the description below. And the next campaign we have also launches on the 15th, and this one's called Malhya, Lands of Legends, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 60 to 180 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative narrative adventure where players are playing cooperatively as heroes, and the natural balance of the world has been threatened, and these players have been called upon to restore balance to this world. Players will be able to choose their characters, each with their own asymmetric abilities and stats, and players are going to be trying to complete different missions and explore the world, and the decisions that players make will affect the progress of the story. And a really interesting aspect of this game is that each of the missions that players can attempt will come with its own booklet, outlining the narrative and the different decisions that players can make, as well as acting as a general dungeon master to walk players through those different missions. And players will be able to find these different missions by exploring different regions and dungeons, and players can visit all sorts of areas of the map to craft, make purchases, or negotiate with different NPCs, or to fight different monsters or solve different riddles that put players into a type of escape room scenario. The different areas are provided in a flipbook, which makes setting up very easy. And something really neat about the combat in this game is that stealth is always an option, and players can perform actions to go in and out of cover and try to get better line of sight to attack their opponents. And it is possible to engage in battle without ever being seen, which is something that I always love doing in video games. And if you do get caught, you can always go guns blazing. And this next campaign was also expected to launch on the 15th, but I'm pretty sure this one is getting pushed off. And this is for the next edition of Quodd Heroes. And I'm just going to mention this one because it was supposed to launch, but the publishers said that they would be making an announcement well before it does launch. And they haven't made any announcement yet, so I'm pretty sure this one's going to be delayed. I did reach out to them and I hadn't heard anything back, so just expect this one in the future, but I'm 99% sure that this isn't going to be launching this week. Also launching on March 15th, we have Iconoclash, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 25 to 45 minutes to play. And this is a platformer combat game where players can play as different characters from different universes, each with their own special abilities, and you can play across a wide variety of maps in order to try and be the last person standing, deal the most damage, or to be the last team standing. If you are familiar with the game Smash Brothers, this is going to have a lot of similarities to that, where you're taking all these different characters from different universes and putting them into a combat arena, with each arena also having something a little bit different about it, with different obstacles, traps, and item spawns. Players will be using their cards to perform actions, and each player can perform 2 actions on their turn. Players will alternate turns until the end of the game is triggered, depending on the mode that they're playing, and then that player will win the game. Also launching on March 15th, we have The Real Thing RPG, and this one is not a board game, so I won't get into quite as much detail, but this is a role-playing game that's designed for fans of the dark, gritty RPGs of the 1990s, and this takes on an early to mid-90s ambiance and flavor, and it's going to explore things like grunge, the war on drugs, gangster rap, and the goth industrial lifestyle. This one's going to feature an exploration of personal desperation and rebirth, and this whole game is inspired by the band Faith No More, more specifically their 1989 album with the same name. And I can't really play you any of their music because I'll definitely get copyright striked, but I'd say their most popular song is called Epic, and the chorus for that one sounds a little bit something like, "You want it all, but you can't have it." Also launching on March 15th, we have Pathways, and this plays 2 players and takes about 5 to 30 minutes to play. And this one is a dexterity flicking game. And in this one, the board's going to be made completely out of wood, which is really nice. And you're going to be trying to flick discs from your side of the board to the furthest row on your opponent's side of the board. Because each time you get one of your discs into the hole on the opposite side of the board, you're going to be earning yourself a victory point. The catch here is there's going to be holes all over the board, and some of your discs might fall into these holes or just sit on top of the board, not falling into any of them. And this is not all bad because you can try and use it to your advantage further in the game, because each time you have a disc fall into a hole, it's going to create a flat surface for you to flick across, which is going to make it a little bit easier for you to get discs onto the other side of the board. And the rules here are very simple. Each player gets 12 shots, and whoever gets more discs into their opponent's row at the end of those 12 shots wins the game. If you're a fan of Chronicle, this is definitely one to check out because I think it will have a bit of a similar feel to that, but it will be at a fraction of the price. Chronicle boards are known to be pretty expensive, and I have seen the pricing on this one, and it is very reasonable considering you're getting a solid piece of wood. And the quality of that board and the discs, I think, do look really nice and will have that solid feel to them. And launching on March 15th, we have Feuds Favors, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play, and this is a competitive medieval strategy combat card game. And in this game, each player is going to be representing their own legion, each starting with an identical deck of cards, but with a unique nobility card. Players can upgrade their deck with additional recruit cards, or swap or gain more nobility cards throughout the game to further customize their deck, and players can also gain permanent upgrades through side quests and gaining favor with different influential figures. Each player is going to be starting the game with 3 randomly drawn cards from their deck face up on the table in front of them, and then also a hand of cards. And this whole game is all about manipulating those 3 cards you have on the table with the ones in your hand, because you're going to want to best prepare yourself for battle with the opponent players. On your turn, you can draw and discard up to 3 cards, optionally exchange a nobility card for a new one, or exchange a card from your hand with one of your face-up cards on the table in order to swap those out. And then finally, players can choose to attack another player, or instead gain favor, which can be used later in the game to exchange for additional cards or victory points. There's 2 ways to win the game, either by gaining a certain number of victory points or by being the last one standing. Battle in this game is really interesting because it's mostly limited to those 3 cards you have out on the table, and you're going to have to decide a role for each one each time you enter into battle. The one you decide to be your main card will provide your strength for the battle. The one you decide to be your support card will provide the special bonus or ability that it has outlined on it, and the one that you decide for your reserve card will be the tiebreaker. Players can optionally play a nobility card, which will offset the battle or provide support in different ways, and then the player with the highest strength, including the abilities, is going to win the battle. Players gain their appropriate rewards for being a part of the battle, but then the loser is going to discard their cards, and if you have no cards left, then you are out of the game. I think this one offers a really interesting take on a combat card game where each of your cards is multi-use, but then you're deciding the role to assign to it, essentially dictating how that card is going to be used in battle. If you're a fan of these types of games, I think this is definitely one to check out, and I have links in the description below. I'm not sure how I did this, but as I was editing, I realized that I forgot to film a couple games. Luckily, I didn't just film them and lose the footage, I just literally forgot to film them, which is better. But the next game we have is a really interesting one, so we really don't want to miss it, and that is for the Bad Karmas and the Curse of the Zodiac. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 40 to 90 minutes to play, and this is a cooperative boss battler with 12 demigods known as Zodiacs, and these are going to be giant miniatures that you're going to have out on the board, and players are going to be trying to battle these different gods. As they evolve during the battle, react to the player's decisions, and actually change the environment where this combat is happening. And the gameplay for this one isn't too complex. It's going to be really easy to learn and teach, but it's going to be including something that's really unique, and I will get to that in a moment. But the way that you play this game is that players are going to be taking turns attacking the boss. At the start of each round, players decide the order that their characters are going to attack, and then they're also going to decide a stance. And the stance is going to allow for some different abilities or tendencies, and these can be different things like allowing that player to have quicker cooldowns that round, or a stronger defense, or other things like that. After players have decided their order and stance, they're going to be alternating turns, and on a player's turn they get a free movement action. Then they're going to be able to play cards to perform their additional actions, and these different actions can be things like different attacks, additional movements, or buffing up their team, or debuffing the enemy, or interacting in different ways with the environment. The boss in this one will react to the actions that the players perform, and it's going to be very intelligent in the way that it does that, because these are actually going to be smart miniatures. But the smarts does not come in the miniature itself, it actually comes with the game board, because this game board is actually going to have some digital components to it, which is going to allow the board to understand where your characters are and where the boss is, and it's going to integrate with an app that will track all the health and attacks and all the different actions that were performed. There's going to be a main app where all the game-based actions occur, and it's going to narrate a little bit about what's happening and allow the players to know what happens next. But then there's also an app for individual players to pull up on their phone where they'll be able to choose the cards that they want to play and whatever actions that they choose to do on their turn. Not only that, but they've also added some immersive audio and visual cues based on what's happening in the game. So some of these bases and components will light up depending on what actions were taken in the game, and different audio will trigger at certain times to add to that immersive experience. But it doesn't stop there, because the board will also come with its own set of smart dice, and as you roll these dice, this will also communicate to the board and the app which dice were rolled, and that will automatically be considered in the whole digital aspect of this game. So this one is not only a campaign for a boss battler with some beautiful miniatures, but it's also a campaign for a new and really innovative idea that's been in the works for quite a while. And this innovative game board is known as the Tibaru, and this is not just designed for the specific game. You can think of this more like a game console like a Switch or a PlayStation or Xbox, where this just has the core interface to link all the different components together, but then you can make any game to interface with these. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more games like this in the future, and it will be really interesting to see what sort of new ideas come out of it. And the next campaign, also launching on the 15th, is called A Game About Quickly Grabbing Creatures That Are Totally Different and Watching Out for Turnips. And the game plays exactly like it sounds. This is for 2 to 3 players and takes about 2 to 4 minutes to play. And this is a speed game where players are racing to grab cards. The more cards that you get, the more points you're going to earn. And the cards look a little bit something like this, with rows of different monsters. And each monster is a mashup of some different body parts. There's a few different heads, a few different bodies, and a few different legs that are possible. And these are all scrambled up and put into rows of these different creatures. And every time you pick up a card, you're going to want to grab a card that is totally different than any card that you have in your hand currently. If you end up with cards that are not totally different, that's going to be a foul, and that will cost you points at the end of the game. If players are having a little bit of trouble finding the card they're looking for in all the chaos, then players can also grab a turnip card. All of these are different, so it makes it really easy for you not to worry about grabbing two of the same. The only thing here is that you can't grab two in a row, and you also can't have more than 5, or those are also fouls. Once players have grabbed all the cards that they can, that's going to trigger the end of the game, and then players pass all their cards to the next person beside them, and that person's going to make sure that they didn't have any fouls as they were drawing the cards, and the player with the most cards minus any fouls is going to win the game. And this next campaign is one that I had just found out about, so I haven't been able to do too much research on this one, but I do have all their games pulled up, and this is going to be for Habitat's 9 Lives and Basketboss, and this is the next campaign coming from Board Game Tables, and all 3 of these games are going to be reimplementations or new editions of games that already exist. And for Habitats, this is a game that has been already released with a few expansions as well, and this newer version is going to include all those expansions in this release. The Habitats is a tile placement game where you're going to be placing different tiles, creating different habitats, and then placing little meeples on those different tiles in order to score victory points. The next game is 9 Lives, and this one's going to be more of a trick-taking game where players are going to be making bets on how many tricks they think they can win, and these are going to range from 1 to 8, but you can only bet on each number twice, and if your bet's correct, you're going to gain points, but if you lose, you're going to lose points. And then the final game is Basketboss, where players are managers trying to put together their basketball teams and trying to put together the best team possible. This is an auction game where each season you're going to be responsible for managing all these complexities and putting together your basketball team. Each player that you add to your team is going to come with its own special abilities, and if you're able to use these abilities well, they can improve your team drastically. And all these will be offered in this single campaign, so if any of these interest you, you can go ahead and check that out. And now launching on March 16th, we have Ryozen, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play, and this is a worker placement game with a really neat rotating board, and it also features different workers of different worker types, each with their own special abilities, and multiple phases where additional actions can be performed by the workers that you had put out on the board. This one was originally planned to launch a few weeks ago, so I already did cover this one. It looks like a really solid game. I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it already, but I'll roll that previous footage for you now. And this one looks like a really interesting Euro game that's bringing some new ideas and concepts to the table. The game plays over 3 rounds, and the first phase in each round is the daytime phase, and during this phase, players are going to be allocating their workers to different locations out on the different regions of the board, and the different regions will grant some different benefits, and there is only a limited spaces that players can occupy. During this phase, event cards will also get drawn, which will affect all players, but those don't come into play until later in the round, so players can prepare for them. And depending on which region players place their workers, they can perform different actions, and some of those actions can be things like discarding one of those event cards, gathering resources, upgrading one of your workers to a new worker, gaining an upper hand in ties for dominance in a region, or building and visiting villages for different benefits. A really neat aspect of the way that the worker placement works in this game is that each worker also has a special ability, and if you put that worker face up when you allocate it out on the board, you'll be able to also use that special ability, or you can put it face down on the board instead, and you won't be able to use that special ability, but instead they'll be worth twice as much influence when it comes to determining who has the most influence in a region. And the way that the center tower works is that as it rotates, it's going to be pointing to a few different regions at the same time, and players can also put their workers out on top of that tower, and they won't be able to use the worker's special ability, and they can choose to either gain a resource of their choice, or they can instead pay a resource and activate one of the abilities from one of the surrounding regions that the tower is pointing at. And then after all workers are placed, we move into the nighttime phase, and this is where players can perform the nighttime action of that region, but then the player with the most influence in that region is also going to gain a Moonshard token. And the way that the Moonshard tokens are used is that you're going to be set collecting different Moonshards throughout the game, and different sets are going to earn you different victory points at the end of the game. This works a little bit differently in the central tower because the player who has the most influence there is going to gain the first player token. At the end of that phase, you're going to rotate the tower and move on to the dawn phase. And the dawn phase is pretty much your cleanup phase. We're going to return the workers back to their respective players, and then you're going to start the next round. At the end of 3 rounds, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And a lot of early birds this week because this one will also be offering an early bird miniature. So if you're interested in that, definitely go ahead and subscribe on their website, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And launching on March 16th, we also have Micro Dojo Loyalty and Deceit. And this is going to be an expansion for the game Micro Dojo, which is a travel-sized tactical Euro game. If you're not familiar with this game, this is a game where players are going to be taking turns moving a ninja, a samurai, a sumo, and a geisha to adjacent spaces on a board, and then perform the action on the space that they have covered. These different actions can gain you special resources, help you build buildings for special abilities, trigger different scoring objectives that are outlined at the top of the board. And these can be different objectives like having the most gold, having the most food, or having the most buildings. And these can change throughout the game, so you're really going to want to trigger these objectives only when you are the one that fulfills them. The catch here is that you can't move a character that you or your opponent had moved last, so you're only really going to be able to move one of the two characters on a given turn. And this expansion is going to add a bunch of really cool new content to the game. There's going to be a horseman, monk, sensei, and messenger added to the characters in the game, each with their own unique movement abilities for the advanced game mode. This expansion is also going to be adding the new concept of clans, and there's going to be 2 clans in the game, Shinchoku and the Tsuyo. And each of these is going to be represented by a loyalty track on each side of the board, and players can move up loyalty in either of those clans to gain special abilities, and even gain some different buildings that are specific to those clans. The first one's going to be more friendly and has abilities that speed up the game, while the other one is going to be more deceitful and has abilities that will slow down the game, giving you more opportunities to be strategic in the way that you play. There's also going to be favor tokens introduced to the game, which sort of act as a new currency that can be used in place of food or gold, and they also have some other uses as well. Finally, this will also offer a modular board where you can create your own board by using different tiles in order to change the types of actions that are available from game to game. But then I really like how the campaigns run because it's offering you a couple different versions of the game, making it super accessible because you can go ahead and get the most deluxified version that you want with the really nice wooden meeples and bells and whistles, or you can choose to get the more simplified version that fits into an envelope and can be shipped to you at a very low cost, which just completely removes virtually all barrier to entry if this is a game that you are interested in trying. And providing these different options to your backers to make sure that anyone who's interested in the game does have a good option to get their hands on it, I think is an amazing thing. And this is a concept that I'd really love to see more of from other publishers in the future. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we have a few awesome giveaways to announce. And the first one is going to be for Motor City, the strategic engine building roll and write game. And this is coming from the same designers that created games like Fleet the Dice game, as well as Three Sisters. And these are roll and write games that have gotten quite a lot of fame and are loved by a lot of gamers out there. With Fleet the Dice game topping most charts when it comes to roll and write games. This one's going to play quite a bit differently. Players are actually going to be playing across 2 different sheets as well as a main board. And you're going to be rolling dice, putting those dice out on the main board, and then drafting those dice, and you're going to be performing 3 actions for each die, depending on where it is on that board. Players will also be able to upgrade their individual player sheets, upgrading the actions along the way, and players are going to be filling out the different areas on their sheets in order to manufacture their cars, improve their engineering, test those cars, and sell them at a dealership. And this giveaway is going to be for the Motor City Kickstarter Edition pledge, which comes with the game as well as all unlocked stretch goals and Kickstarter exclusive content. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag motor and let us know what your dream car is. For me, it's pretty tough because I do love almost all muscle cars, especially the really old ones. But I've always been a fan of those really old Ford Mustangs, especially those special edition ones that just have wild horsepower and just look incredible. What they lack in efficiency, they make up for in raw power. Good luck in the giveaway. This is one that I wish I could enter myself because this game has a lot that I like, and I think this is one that would be a great addition to my collection. And the next giveaway we have is for Alice in Wordland, and this is the Curiouser and Curiouser expansion, which is going to be adding a few different new roles to the game, as well as some deluxified components. And this is a word game where players are going to be trying to say words related to a certain topic, but they're going to have to avoid saying a word that's already been said by another player, and they're also going to have to avoid using words that contain certain letters for that round. Each player is going to have special abilities that they can use to their advantage, and each player is going to be alternating the character that they're playing as each round, until every player has had a chance to play every character, and then that ends the game, and the player with the most victory points is going to win. This is a game that's really easy to teach, and it's super fast-paced and a lot of fun. And I just noticed that they took a little quote from my previous video and put it on their page, and this is 100% accurate because everything I say is 100% accurate. And that's that this game is a lot of fun. It's a game that you can play with any age group, and it's guaranteed that you will get a ton of laughs. If you're a fan of word games, I think this is definitely one that you'll want to check out, and you'll definitely want to enter this giveaway because winning the game is the best way to check it out. And this giveaway is going to be for the Alice in Wordland Deluxe Edition, which is going to include the base game, the Curiouser and Curiouser expansion, as well as the deluxeified components and all unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag word, and I want you to leave a comment that fulfills the requirements of what we see in this image here. So leave us a word of something in your sandwich, and you can't use the letters B, C, or N. And you can't use a word that someone else already used in the comments, so whoever wins this, I am going to check to see if anyone else did use that word before you. Watching these videos early has its benefits. So I hope you have fun with this one, and good luck in the giveaway. And now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways. And the first one we had was for Factory 42, which is on GameFound now. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you appreciate the work that goes into it and you'd like to show your support, I truly appreciate you checking out the Patreon. It helps make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, which really means a lot. But if you're not able to join the Patreon and you still do want to support the channel, watching these videos, leaving a like and comment, and subscribing to the channel does help a lot as well with those YouTube algorithms. And I really enjoy reading the comments and the words of encouragement. And I do make an effort to at least try to read every single comment, and I try to reply to as many that I can. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner for Factory 42 is Trodos, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, and I apologize if I have mispronounced your name, but at this point it's just part of the prize. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Factory 42. And the next giveaway we had was for Worldbreakers, so let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Worldbreakers is Jacques Za. And to enter this giveaway, I had asked viewers to let us know what they would do with absolute power, and Jack says that he would use his absolute power to corrupt and summon an old god. A very noble cause there. Those old ones have been sleeping for a really long time, and someone just really needs to wake them up before they waste their whole life away. Just reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out. And that is everything I have for you this week. I hope you all have an excellent weekend. I'm looking forward to mine quite a bit. I'm going to get to meet my new nephew tomorrow. My sister just had her first baby, and it's a healthy baby boy, and I'm really excited to meet him. Plus, we're also meeting at Red Lobster, which I haven't been in like 3 years, so I'm super excited about that too. Seafood's like the best food ever, not to mention those infinite butter rolls. So tomorrow's going to be pretty great. Until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.